to do.
Let's talk about the SEC. This is one of those things that me and you grew up on. My dad was dragging me to LSU games too. And look, there's no environment like it, right? Like I don't know. You've been to more environments than I have when it comes to college sports. Have you been to Ohio State and seen that?
I have.
I've heard
plenty.
good things.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, it's good. Like people ask me, I don't know, I'll probably get that question more than any is like, what's the best
Yeah, what is it for
college football environment? I mean, it's a night game at LSU for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard. It's really hard to beat that. It's hard to beat the tailgating and the atmosphere there. But, across the country, the problem with Ohio State is most of their games at noon.
Yeah, that's true.
And then the only other, I've covered several of their games there, but one of the only other ones I've covered has been, or the only one that I covered that's not at noon was a playoff game. Actually, my dad was there last year.
Yeah.
And they played at night, but it was 15 degrees. So it was just, it's hard to gauge that environment, I guess. But yeah, there's certainly a lot of SEC environments, like when Tennessee is like rolling.
Oh, yeah.
Especially when they play Alabama, that atmosphere. I covered that game 3 or 4 years ago in Knoxville. It was incredible. Alabama games are awesome. Auburn games are great. Game day. A night game at Jordan-Hare is really cool. A&M. I mean, there's a lot. And then outside of the SEC, it's a weird one, but Oregon has a great environment. It's beautiful. It's a small stadium. It's really loud. It's a great little like college town sort of feel. It's all walkable. It's a really cool environment too.
I like that. Now, this is a tough question for guys like us, but once again, coming from the South, is the energy around or the fear of the SEC, do you think it's dying now? You got 3 Big Ten teams that took over the conference, right?
Yeah,
or
three straight Big Ten national championships, and first time that's happened since 1942. So it's been a long time since the Big Ten sort of kind of found the dominance that it is right now. And I think what's happened with this new era is it's sort of leveled the playing field a bit for the top 40, 50, 60 schools. I think it's grown the gap between the power conferences and the group of 6 conferences. But it's closed the gaps in a lot of ways with the power league, within the power leagues. And I think there's 2 reasons there. One, though people are paying differently right now, everybody's still paying. Everybody's still paying players to a degree. There might be some differences right now, but there's enough. They're close enough in paying that all of the things that the blue blood kind of powers in the sport used to have an advantage over recruiting, which are like stadium size, right? And like history and legacy of a program and brand and logo and all that. Like all that stuff doesn't mean as much in recruiting because you're getting paid. And then 2, the second part, I think, why things have leveled off is you've got the portal and the liberty to transfer multiple times players. So I always use an example of Georgia. They used to stockpile specifically defensive talent, defensive front, and they had a lot of guys that would rotate, right? And so, and I can't remember his name, but there was a rotational defensive lineman in Georgia who left. I think it's Damon Williams left last year and went to Missouri to start, right? That's the difference, right? So you have rotational backup players at the Georgias, Alabamas, even LSU, Texas, Ohio State that now are like, well, I can leave. If I don't like my situation, I don't have to stay anymore. So I can leave, and they're leaving. And they're not just leaving for money; they're leaving for playing time and a bigger role. And so those 2 things, the money leveling off and maybe not making brands and the legacy, all the aspects that the blue bloods used to use in recruiting, it's kind of the money's leveled that out, but also the transfer portal, the movement of players being able to move when they want. I think all that has sort of leveled things off, and we've seen we're in the greatest era of like parity that college football's ever had. There's been there's been facts that back that up. I think this past year, I don't know the final numbers, but like maybe 2/3 of the way through the year, the average power conference margin of victory was around 8 points, which is the lowest it's been in like 25 years or more. So everything it is more like, especially the SEC, when you look at individual conferences, it's more like the NFL. The games are starting to get that way.
I completely agree. I was leaning more that way. Where like, sooner or later the cap's coming. They're gonna say, look, you can't spend this much. You got to keep this thing even. We're gonna move past that toward, everyone's gonna have their own GM.
Right.
You're only gonna have so many slots, restrictions on your actual scholarship. I think all these things are coming. You probably already know that, right?
Yep.
The lack of leadership is definitely something NCAA is talking about. I saw something else by you, and this was the fact that you might have conferences start regulating themselves.
Yeah, that is so. The lack of national enforcement over a lot of the rules right now, including transferring and tampering in the compensation of players and all that, there's a lack of really much enforcement. So in the absence of national enforcement from the NCAA and the new enforcement arm, the College Sports Commission that the Power Leagues created to enforce the rev share and the compensation, in absence of that, the SEC and even some other leagues, I think, are internally sort of discussing preliminarily discussing what if the governance and the rulemaking and enforcement came from the National Association back to the conferences. And I say back because 40 years ago, that's how it was. The SEC had an investigative arm, they had an enforcement division, and they enforced, not the NCAA, they enforced their rules. And then it just sort of grew to where the conferences, all these conferences kind of came together, and they created the National Association more, and they sort of went to a national regulation and enforcement. But now there's thought, since it's so hard to enforce it nationally because you get sued,
right,
but for antitrust issues, that maybe it's time for deregulation, which is what they call it, down back to the conference. I don't know if that will eventually happen. They are talking about it in a serious nature, at least in the SEC. And some might say the SEC wants more enforcement,
right,
because the Big Ten has bigger schools, like just bigger, right? I mean, some of these schools are like 60, 70,000 enrollment. Indiana's a good example. It has the biggest alumni base in the country.
Did not know that.
Yeah, 800,000.
Did not know
So
that.
I would guess, I'm just guessing here, that 6 or 7 of the Big Ten's 18 schools have bigger alumni bases than any of the SEC schools, right? It's just the way it is. They're also located in population centers, big cities, right? Most of them,
true.
many of them are. And in general, you have more alums, you're going to have more boosters, you're going to have more money, you're in a bigger city, more opportunities for NIL. Plain and simple, like they do have an advantage in this world. And so I think it's an advantage for the SEC to say like, well, we want more rules, right? We want enforcement to happen. Now, there's another argument of that, and that's Big Ten people pointing at the SEC and saying, well, you've been paying players for 100 years just illegally under the table. So there's also that argument too.
All right.
But, so what we're seeing is it's indicative of all of college athletics and why things move so slowly and people can't seem to agree on a whole lot, which is happening with the college football playoff right now, is that all the conferences are worried about their conference. Mm-hmm. Each school is worried about its school.
Yep.
Each coach is worried about its team, right? Everybody's got self-interest, and you understand why, but that also leads to real problems in making decisions, right? And that's what we're seeing.
You talk